Okay, I'm going to go ahead and step through the process on how to add a new monster into Torchlight 2 via the Guts tool. Um, we're going to use an existing monster that's already in Torchlight 2 and just modify that slightly so you can add more variety to the game. I'm using the Steam version of Torchlight 2 and using Windows 7, so if you're using a Mac or something else, this will probably be somewhat different. Let's go ahead and jump into Guts. We're going to go ahead and create a new mod. So let's just go ahead and call this whatever you want to call it. I'm just going to call it Monster Test number 1. I'm going to assume you've already opened up Guts before. The first time you open up Guts, it's going to take a while, but every time you open up Guts after that, it should be pretty quick. So now we have Guts open. What we're going to want to do is find the monster that we want to edit. I have a shortcut already linked to the Torchlight 2 modding folder in my computer. You're going to want to create shortcuts too, so that you can get to things faster. But if this is your first time, you're going to want to go to the C drive, your program files, your Steam Apps Common, Torchlight 2 folder, or wherever you installed it. And within Torchlight 2, you're going to find a media folder. This is what Guts extracted from Torchlight 2 game to give you all of your resources for modding. So here you have the media folder. We're going to open that up. Inside media, we want to open up models. Inside the models folder, we want to open up monsters. Let's see, there's our monsters. And then we want to select which monster we want to edit so we can look at the files inside. Let's go ahead and open the tarantula. You have a whole bunch of files inside these folders here, but what we want to look at is the material, because we're going to go ahead and edit the texture file that the monster is using. And you're going to want to use Notepad for these. I've already set my material to auto default to Notepad, so we can look at the text inside. So inside, the two important things you want to look at are the top there we have material. This is a material name. This is what ties the image file to the actual model. And then we have the texture file name itself, the little picture file. They have PNGs. You can try and use PNGs. I've been using DDS files, and I'll go through that a little bit later. Anyway, so this is the tarantula.png file that we're going to want to take a look at and edit. So most of the time in the resource files, they don't have the PNG files. They have the DDS files, which is perfectly fine. You're just going to have to use Photoshop or GIMP or some other tool with DDS in it. If you're using Photoshop, you're going to need to download the NVIDIA DDS plugin. So when you open up the DDS file, just go ahead and use the defaults. It's fine. And here we have the texture file. And I'm just going to go ahead and color this a different color so we can see that it's the edited version. You can do whatever you want to the file. Let's see, the yellow doesn't look too different. Let's just go ahead and give this a negative image so it'll be really obvious. We're going to go ahead and save this file. Don't save it to the main directory where we just opened it from. Save it somewhere else. Right now I'm just going to dump it on my desktop. So just save it as DDS file, but you're going to want to give it a different name. Don't give it the same name that the Torchlight 2 is using. So I'm going to call it whatever, tarantula_test01. Alpha channel should be selected. I'll explain what that is in just a second if you don't know already. The settings are pretty important. If you go to Torchlight forums for Runic games, you should be able to find some explanations on the different NVIDIA settings. Typically, you're going to want to have it set to this DXT3 with the explicit alpha set. Certain textures in the game, you're going to need to generate mipmaps. Others you're not. I found for the most part that no mipmaps works great for monsters. All the rest of the settings you should just leave alone. Don't even mess with them unless you're having some kind of an issue. And then we're just going to go ahead and save that file. The alpha channel that becomes important in DDS is over here, at least in Photoshop, we have layers and channels, and you see an alpha channel here. This is what sets the transparency for the monsters on the texture. If you don't have alpha channels in certain files, some of the characters are going to have extra pieces that you don't normally see, and it's going to look kind of strange. So you want to make sure that the alpha channel is present. And you can always go ahead and edit the alpha channel too to make your monsters a little bit different if you want to. Either way, let's go ahead and close this out. So we've created a new texture for our monster. So let's go ahead and create the monster within guts. So let's go ahead and go back to guts. You're going to go to the data editors, units, monsters. So it's going to go ahead and load up all the monster types. The first time you open up the monsters, it might take a while. I've already gone through here, so it doesn't take quite as long. If you don't already have it set on this first drop-down filter, you want to go down and select monster. It'll make things easier, and we're going to want to type in the name of the monster that we want so that guts runs a little bit smoother. Otherwise, if you're looking at all the monsters at once, it kind of runs slow. So let's go ahead and type in Tara for the tarantula and just hit enter, and it's going to filter out everything with the word Terra in it. So there you see in the list here, we've got tarantula. I'm just going to narrow this down a little bit more so it runs a little bit faster. There we go, tarantula. So here we have all the tarantula settings. But what we want to do is add a new unit based on this one. So you have this little plus sign up here to add a new unit. So let's add that new unit. Here it already has it, tarantula from what we just selected here. But let's go ahead and give it a different file name, because we're going to give each monster you make a unique name so that the Torchlight 2 doesn't get confused on what's going on. So I'm going to go ahead and call this tarantula test. And what we want to do is set collect clone. The monster should already be selected as tarantula from selected over here, but if not, or if you want to use something else, you can go ahead and go through this list. It's kind of hard to see because it gives you the full path name rather than just the ending, which is kind of annoying, but either way, if you select the files, it'll then show the ending, and you can up and down arrow through these different objects. But the easiest way to do is just make sure you select it beforehand, before you add the monster, and then it'll automatically populate. Then just hit OK, and then you see in our list now we have tarantula test 01, and these are, if this is selected, you'll have all the properties here to go ahead and edit. So you can edit the description here, sprays venom, and some other stuff. And then we have the name. This is the file name, the name that Torchlight 2 uses that you won't ever see playing the game. The name that shows up when you're playing the game when you hover over a monster is this display name. So let's go ahead and call this the tester tarantula. Most of the stuff you don't want to touch unless you know what you're doing. You can go ahead and play around with some of the stuff. Some of it may break the game, but you can always just go ahead and go back and fix it or start over. Either way, here some of the most typical things you can change your damage, how much damage it's doing. So we can go ahead and up the damage. Let's say right now it's set to 67% physical and 33% poison because it's cloned from the other tarantula. Let's go ahead and just bump up the poison, drop down the physical damage, and you got the HP here. Let's boost the max HP and the min HP to 100. What this min and max is the Torchlight 2 will randomly select something between the min and the max when it creates the monster in the game. Each single unit it creates, it'll choose a random one. So the bigger you make this, the bigger the range will be that it's allowed when it randomizes it. You can adjust the armor settings. You can make these monsters pretty unique by just changing these alone. If you want to do that, you can go ahead and make them faster or slower by these running speeds. You just got to play around with this and jump in the game and see how it plays. You have your scaling, that's how big or large the monster is. This is a 1-to-1 scale, so we can make it big if we want. It gets kind of weird if we make it a little bit. Let's increase size a little bit. Make it 1.5 times the base model from when they created the model for the monster. Variation is again part of that randomization. So if you put 0.5, you're going to get that scaling of 1.5 plus or minus 0.5 when it generates the monsters in game. You can go ahead and adjust behaviors if you want for how the AI behaves. And one of the key things for creating the monster diversity is the skills. Here you can see it has spider poison breath down here. So we can go ahead and add new ones to this. Let's create a new one. You have a drop down of all these skills. A word of caution that some of the skills in here are player skills. So certain skills may not work correctly for monsters. My only suggestion is that you just get familiar with what the skills are and who has what skills, what the monster skill types are, and just kind of play around with it in game and see what's working and what's not working, and ask around on the forums. But for the most part, let's just go through here. Some of it makes pretty obvious sense as to what's a monster skill and what's not. Let's go ahead and find something in here. Okay. usually want to find something that's pretty similar to what the monster does, so it doesn't look too odd. But we might just go ahead and end up picking something random. Let's go ahead and just choose some teleportation here. So that's the teleportation skill. You have chances here. This is the chance odds that it's going to have to cast the skill. The higher the chance is, the more often it's going to cast that skill. You have your cancel chance, and then you have animation overrides. Some of the stuff you're going to have to look into all the animation files that we were in before. It gets a little bit detailed, and if you have questions about this, you can just ask me in the forums or here on the video, and I'll try and answer them best I can. Typically, you don't really need to touch the animation overrides. Sometimes it'll help get a skill working a little bit better if there's some problem with the skill. But let's go ahead and increase this chance so we can see it in action up to 90% chance. I'll just leave the cancel. Let's see, put it at 10% cancel. So there we go. You're given a new skill. You can give it as many skills as you want. My only recommendation is if you give it more skills, just drop the chances down and everything so you don't have it firing off skills like crazy all the time. You can see in here we have, for putting on the new texture we created, that inverted texture I edited before, the DDS file, you have two options in here. You have texture replace, and we have files as texture override. You can use either one. The texture override is going to be key and probably the easiest one to use if you're using if the monster has a single texture file it uses. Otherwise, if it's using more than one texture, because some monsters use several textures, mainly monsters with pieces of armor or something like that. There's the Armadox, the armadillo-looking guy has armor on it, and he has two texture files. And so you'll have to do them, piecemeal them here. If you have questions about how to do that, I can do that. But when you do that, you have to give it the actual material name that we looked at before. So let's open up that material. So here's the material file for the tarantula. The material name would be this tarantula_mat. You'd put that in the material name. In the texture file, you're going to have to give it the full path of where that texture file is located. But first, you're going to relocate that file into something that makes sense, into a correct directory, which we haven't done yet. So let's go ahead and do that while we're talking about it right now. I dumped it onto my desktop before, I believe. Let's go ahead and look at my desktop. So there's my tarantula file. Let's go ahead and cut that out of my desktop and dump it into the Torchlight II folder. So we had the Torchlight II folder before we were in the media section. Now we're going to want to go down to the mods section. So inside our mods we have our monster test 001 folder we created earlier. That's the mod that we just created. Inside here we have a media folder. There's a units file. That's the units that we're making here inside of Guts. It automatically starts generating all that for you. Which reminds me, save often. It's always a good thing to save often. I've noticed the Torchlight, the Guts is a little bit buggy on occasion and doesn't save what I've been working on. But let's go back to where the mod folders are. So again, we're in the mods, monster test, media folder. There's our units file. That's the monster unit we just created that we're working on. Spider, there's a tarantula guy in here. So this is everything we've been editing. You can see the teleport got added in there. That's all good. But what we want to do is add that texture file in. So you can put it in wherever you want. Normally, the easiest thing to do and the best thing to do is to follow the format folder structure that Torchlight 2 is using. So they have media, models, monsters, tarantula, and we're at media, so we should typically, for ease later on, create the similar folder structure here. Let's go ahead and create the same one. I'm going to give it a different folder name though. It's called the test tarantula. And then I'm going to paste my DDS file in there. So let's go back to Guts and tell it where our file is located. But I'm going to use a texture override just because it's simpler. Okay, so we click that little ... there to open the browser. So we want to go find that file that we just dumped in there. It automatically sets you into the root directory where Torchlight 2 is, which we want to go ahead and exit out to go into our mods folder to find that file we created. And there we go. We can go ahead and select that there. So now it's there. Let's go ahead and save it. Our new monster is now created, but it is not in the game yet. It would be in the game if you created a unique dungeon and added that monster into that dungeon, but if the monster file is there just alone, Torchlight does not know that it's supposed to go and grab that monster file, so we have to tell it to go and grab that monster file when it plays the game. Um, and just as a side note, if you're trying to look at your monster in Guts, uh, Guts typically will not let you look at the monster until you reload Guts. Mainly the texture, I've noticed the texture and where it finds all the paths and files and stuff like that seem to get established when you start Guts and does not update itself too well while you're adding files. So if you're having a problem viewing something that you've edited and you're trying to look at the model or texture or something like that, it's best usually just to exit Guts and come back in if you want to make sure everything is where it's supposed to be as far as Guts is concerned. Otherwise it might get a little confused. So letting Torchlight 2 know that your monster is there is under spawn classes. So data editors, spawn classes. Here are all the spawn classes within the game. These are everything that spawns in game, which would be the spawn classes. Just to make it easy, we're going to go ahead and add the monster into the starting zones so we can see it. But you can choose any area you want to add it into. The name of the starting zone, there it is. I almost forgot. So there's Echo Pass. So here's Echo Pass. You can see all of the monsters that load up in Echo Pass. By default, sometimes this window is a little small. You won't see everything. Just drag it over and you can see all the settings. So here we have the Ratman and all these other monsters in here. And we're going to want to go ahead and add a new choice. So we're going to add a new monster in, which is our monster. And in this list here, we're going to want to find our tarantula. So there's our tarantula test. I just typed in T in there to filter it out. That's pretty much all you have to do to select that unit. So now it's going to say, hey, when I use this spawn class, go ahead and throw to the tarantula into the mix. But we're going to want to tell it how many tarantulas to spawn when it does spawn tarantulas at any given location. Let's go ahead and give it a randomized number between 1 and 3. So it'll spawn 1, 2, or 3 monsters just by random. And the weighting is how often it's going to spawn. So the more weighted something is, the more likely it is going to show up. So we'll get it just to pop up a lot just so we can see it. So you can see here the Rattling Torch shows up a lot because it has a 100 weight. This War Beast is 25, so it'll show up less than that. And I believe the way that it determines the weighting is it kind of adds all the weights up together as a total sum, and then takes your weight and divides it by the total sum to allocate a percentage. I believe the other possibility is that the more weight you put on something means it's going to increase the number of monsters total that it spawns in that area, but I honestly don't know. Either way, adding your monster in, give it a weight so it'll give it the chance to spawn. Higher the weight, the more likely it's going to happen. Let's go ahead and save it. And that's going to save that to our modding folder that we're working in. So let's go back to the base where we have our monster test section, right? So you see it, we're in the mods folder, monster test, media, and our spawn class got created. There's Echo Pass. What we're going to want to do though is, in order to make sure this mod does not conflict with other people's mods, if you want to play nice with other people, is we're going to want to edit this file so that we don't mess up other people's mods. And the best way to do that is to find your section that you added. So here we added the tarantula in here, tarantula test. We're going to leave that guy alone. All the other objects that it's spawning, let's go ahead and delete those. Okay, I'll explain why in just a minute. So we're just stuck with our last little object. Let's leave the spawn class alone and the string for the name Echo Pass alone. What's going to happen is, we're going to say this, what's going to happen is when Torchlight 2 builds this mod, it's going to take this spawn class string name of Echo Pass, it's going to look at what it already built, and it's going to go ahead and just add our new object into what it already built. So if multiple people are using Echo Pass, the Echo Pass spawn class, and they added their monsters in, or whatever else they want to add in, your monster will get added in as well on top of that and not override theirs. And the next key to making that work is the file name. If you keep the file name the same, it's going to override. So in order to prevent the overriding, we just got to give it a unique file name. So let's give it the tarantula, whatever. It's misspelled there. Tarantula test 001, or whatever unique name you want to give it. And there we have it in a new spawn class that's going to merge with the existing spawn classes rather than override them. It's a neat little trick that you can use not only in monster spawns but in all kinds of other stuff throughout modding. For whatever reason, it's not intrinsically in the guts as far as I can tell. I don't know why. I kind of wish it was. There's also a merging folder option too, which I will probably cover in a different tutorial if someone else doesn't already cover it. So let's go ahead and exit guts so we can rebuild the files, because if you edit these files directly yourself outside of guts, guts is going to get confused again. So we want to restart guts. Also note this is a .dat file, which I opened with Notepad just for ease of editing. .dat and .material and several other files you can just open as text editor and mess around with them if you are confident in doing so. So let's go ahead and reopen guts and just select the mod that we've been working on already. So it's going to go ahead and rebuild all our files. If you're paying attention to your files, you'll see that you have the echopass.dat.bin.dat file, which we don't want anymore. Let's go ahead and delete that guy. And it rebuilt, Guts automatically built a new file for Torchlight 2 to use based on our file name, which is perfect. Which, by the way, is something you want to do. You want to make sure that your files are clean to avoid errors later on. So like I said before, we can make sure our monster is working. So let's go ahead and do that before we jump in the game. So over in the layout section, if you just want to do a quick check on your monster, right-click in this blank section, go to Units, Monster. This is not the spawn class itself, but we'll show you the monster directly. Let's go ahead and zoom in here. Over here on the right side, you have the properties for monsters. If you're not already there, you have a monster option. Just set the pet ferret for whatever reason by default, at least in my Guts version. So let's go ahead and find our tarantula. Let's make sure it's there. Tarantula test. There it is, and you can see the you can see the inverted texture on there. So it's working great. So what we want to do is build this mod. So you choose the mods tab down here in Guts, and this mod button up here. Even though it don't look like a button. My recommendation to the Runic team is make that look like a button, but whatever. Package and publish is what we want. So what this is going to do is it's going to make this so that Torchlight 2 can see it and use it, rather than just Guts. By default, you'll have a lot of this stuff selected. If you want to publish it to Steam, go ahead and use all this stuff. Since I'm just going to show you in this demonstration what I'm doing, I'm going to unselect all this Steam publishing stuff. And the only thing I really want to select and care about is this building button here. And I'm going to, let's see it here, this view mod folder at completion. You have all this other stuff over here that you can go ahead and edit whatever you want, but all we need to do is just build. So we're going to build it here. It gave it an ID number and all this stuff down here, and it created the mod. And then it tells you where it created it to. If you get confused to where it is, it gives you the file path. So it dumped it in our mod test folder. And there we go. There it is, monster test 0001.mod, and that's our mod. My computer thinks it's a video clip, but whatever, it's not. So let's go ahead and start up Torchlight 2. Torchlight 2 starts. You have these two options here. We want to select the bottom one to add mods. Let's select the mod that we want to look at and go ahead and run it. Let's create a new game. There we go. Let's create. Let's create our character. And see if the mod worked. Remember, it's going to be random as to whether or not when the tarantula shows up. So let's just run around through the game here and hope that the tarantula shows up some point soon. Tarantula, tarantula, where are you? There it is. There's one of our tarantulas. There we go. I just killed the tarantula. And that's how you add new monsters into the game. So you can see it teleporting there. It's pretty nice. So enjoy. Leave me any questions you have, and hopefully I'll try and answer them either in this tutorial in the comments or in another tutorial. If it lets me exit. Sometimes it asks you about a bunch of stuff for saving, which we don't want to do. Come on. Maybe I won't be able to stop recording. Fantastic.